my screen. If Belle lets me. Belle?
You should be able to share now.
Ah, yes. Well, give me just a second.
It was nice of Chief Ewing to drop off the packets today. Mitch got a break from the dogs, so.
That's funny. That does not surprise me. I knew I took them over. I didn't know who was gonna to get it. So in the other budget workshops, there wasn't a lot of change or discussion items. In this one with public services, there actually is quite a bit. So I thought if I could just go through and make sure we're all kind of looking at this the same way, that I'm hoping it will help spur some discussion. If, as always, people should feel free to interrupt. There we go. So when we're talking about the expense budget, people are used to seeing general government and debt and public safety, which we've already talked about. Public services is probably a term that is fairly new, and it is really for those outward-looking departments, code, planning, public work, Parks and Rec, the library, economic development, and then public works and the capital improvement pie. Wanted to just show you that when we are talking about expenses by classification, the town services are gross expenses, so there is no revenue to net them out. The other two assessments are at the end of their process after the revenues have been applied. So these are just payments that the town would make. So public services, we just talked about, it's community development. In our community Office of Community Development, we've got code enforcement, planning, and economic development. It's also the library, parks and recreation, and we put facilities in there because a lot of what facilities does is supporting the use of the buildings, especially with regard to the amenities and the buildings that Parks and Rec and the library use, as well as the downtown street clearing that for economic development. So the total public services budget is a little over $2 million. Council would be aware that they're funded by two different sources. One source is the general fund, which everything but yellow is funded in. And then economic development is that big piece of pie off to the side in yellow. And that's funded by the TIFs. So when we look at that, the general fund is funding about $1,048,000 of public services. So that's planning and code, Parks and Rec, the libraries and facilities. The tax increment financing districts, that's your restricted funds that were limited in how they can be expended. They fund the economic development budget, which is $881,000. You'll see the bulk of that comes from the downtown and transit-oriented TIF district. We have maxed out what we can spend out of that district. We have used it well, and this year we're pulling just about what is going into it out of it again. So we're not creating large balances in that district. Penobscot Valley Dermatology is the only other district that we are suggesting that we should pull operating expenses out this year. And all the other districts, the only expenditures out of them are related to credit enhancement agreements, which are agreements that this council or prior councils have entered into. So when we think about public services, they're autonomous departments that are closely connected, that provide the services that help to define the unique qualities and character of our community. It's a mouthful, but what it really means is that when you look in total at community development, the library, parks and rec, and facilities, they're really defining what people like about the community. It's the services that they enjoy. It's the codes that make the look of the community, the council's vision. They're not, it's not response driven. It is very much supposed to be very flexible and able to meet the community's needs that from time to time change, as we are dealing with right now. So council likes to talk about mandated services versus discretionary services. Most all of what is in public services are discretionary. They've been built over time because people want them, because they are what make Orono meaningfully unique and help our vision become reality. The things that are mandatory, code enforcement, licensing and permitting, the planning board, trail maintenance. It's not mandatory that you have trails, but if we have trails, we are required to maintain them. TIF administration, not required we have a TIF district, but if we have one, we have to maintain it. Grants, the same idea. And several of our grants are administered through economic development and parks and rec. And I think this last one is a catch-all, federal and state regulatory compliance and reporting. What I'm trying to get at there is that people, especially with library and parks and recreation, they're the fun departments. They're the departments where people get to go and have fun. And oftentimes people forget that they're still our employers and we're still governed by the same rules and requirements that we are in every other department. So the budget assumptions. The budget assumptions within public services is based on past practice and needs, just like in every other department. However, these departments are really undergoing some significant shifts in the programming and in needs for the community. The delivery systems are changing. So it used to be Lori would unlock the library door and people would come in and there was a kind of a method of how people got their needs met. And the programs that we put on, they were pretty easy we knew what we were doing and how we were going to deliver it. That's completely changed. Right now, she is working very hard to try to figure out how to make curbside delivery happen. So as these delivery systems are changing, it's taking time and thought around how do we change with the needs. Community needs are changing. So we in Parks and Rec have a partnership with the University of Maine to do summer camp, and that's pretty much, that's childcare for K-5, grades K-5. Well, there are not as many people are going to work. The university isn't right now planning to run the any camps. They're going to make a decision on June 1st for July 1st, but it's a real possibility that summer camp isn't going to be available. Do we need to step in and fill a void somewhere? Is there a community need that is going to be different? Is kind of what I'm trying to get at there, that it's not the way it's always been. And we have a universe of unknowns. how do we build community, which is what public services are all about, with social distance? How do we, can you still run a story time for toddlers maintaining 6 feet of social distance and not having people all over each other, when that was kind of, it was kind of everybody got together in a tight group? How does it work? How are we going to provide the services that we've always historically provided? So what I'd like to do, that's how we built the budget, with these big questions in them that we really need some feedback from council in order to fill out. I'd like to go department by department with a high level review. And if you have individual questions on individual line items, we could, if it's all right, we could take them when we do that review. Does that work? And I don't see everybody because I'm sharing my screen, so a little blind. So
Work
if,
for us, Sophie.
all right. So for code enforcement, we have 1 code officer and about 5 hours a week of administrative staff support to assist him. The change in this department this year is a request for some specialized code software. We have tried for the last several years to dance around and cheap software that will allow us to track and appropriately document code violations. And after about a year of searching, Dave finally found one that is relatively inexpensive at $12,000. I know it doesn't seem it, but the options were definitely more expensive. And this is a thing that we really need. We are seeing places where we're losing track because we're asking one person to manage a whole lot of information without a good system in place for it. So paper works great until you're in a system where you're trying to do everything electronically and having it tie to GIS. This will also allow us to have multiple departments have access to the same information, which we don't have right now, which has caused some issue when people apply for a permit and somebody forgets to make sure that life safety sees it, and then we have to chase it down on the backside. It causes it can cause delays, and it also can cause problems for community members, which I don't think we want. So, but for the software, there would be a decrease in this department of about $10,000 in the request. With the software, the increase is about $1,200. Questions about code?
And the $10,000 decrease would be because the halftime person went to public safety?
Yeah, we decreased the number of hours that code had the individual.
So Sophie, I was one of the things actually I highlighted was that knowing that in communities similar to our, I guess, top 20 or 3 or more, obviously it's based on the fact that they probably have 100% of their land as taxable or close to it. But having said that, I was like really good with this because I hate living in the archaic world, and I think paper does create more of an issue than it's worth, because if you go down the road, you're probably losing monies based on time in itself down through the whole thing. So is there any way of kind of like knowing that we have one person who does that job, that it will obviously free up some time so it's not so cumbersome for that individual?
So I think, and I would invite Dave to pop in if need be, but I think where I see the savings of time is going to be on the management side, quite honestly, freeing up some of Dave's time, freeing up my time when something gets missed and I've got to now loop in 2 other departments to try to solve a problem. I think at first it's going to be more time consuming for code. I do have a volunteer that's willing to come in and help get some information put into the system, because as you know, the system's only as good as the information that's put in. And there will be a learning curve in how to use it, but I think ultimately we will find efficiencies and we'll most definitely have a much better quality product and the ability for people to get more transparency, which I think is really important.
And Sophie, I was thinking too, I approve of this because I think it's important, especially during this time period when we're all online and all that fun stuff. But eventually it will pay for itself. Do you agree that this will save us money in the long run?
I think it will save us money in the long run. I do, I can't see Dave, but my understanding is that this $12,000 we're buying, it's a cloud-based service. So this amount will go down, but not go away. Correct, Dave?
Yes, and if I can, I'll try to answer both of those at the same time. Terry, you hit it right on the head, and Cheryl, you are 100% accurate. Is that when you look at the things that we have a worker who is extremely busy, and as you mentioned, Terry, you know, we're the only community in the top 20 in the state that has one code enforcement officer. Everyone, our competitors all have anywhere from 3 to 6. What I was looking at was how can I make his time more efficient? This software will allow him to do his reports when he's out in the field so that he doesn't have to come back to the office to write a report. And it's immediately available. It allows him to search our cloud-based system as he's doing an investigation to find out you know, what other records we have on file. So my expectation is that it will make them much more efficient. And I say it's saving money in that we're using this rather than trying to add another person. In many other communities, I would say that their option would have been, they would have added a second or a third code enforcement officer. So for $12,000, it's a heck of a lot cheaper than adding manpower. So what we're trying to do is make what limited resources we have more efficient. And I feel confident that this is gonna help to do that.
Dave, is this an annual fee? I mean, is this a licensing?
It's a first year expense. The subsequent years, the number goes down, but it doesn't, as Sophie mentioned, it doesn't go away. And when I say I'm a little hesitant on this is there's like 3 or 4 different programs that we're looking at that would be able to fit into this, and the costs are, you know, one may be more upfront but less in years to come. Other ones are less, but it's the same amount every year. So we're depending on which particular software we end up going with will reflect whether it's a reoccurring expense at that level, but it's sort of a not to exceed amount. But my intent, because I'm frugal, would be to have to pay it once, and then and subsequent years that the amount would go down, just to pay the registration fees that as you mentioned. Great question.
Thank you,
So
Yeah,
Dave,
oh, go ahead, Tom.
I assume that in researching these different programs, you will be talking with code enforcement officers and other communities that are actually using them, so that we're pretty well assured that what we get is going to fit well with our needs.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely important. Matter of fact, those 3 or 4 that I've narrowed it down to are ones that I have done that follow-up already to talk with communities who are currently using it. There were probably 12 different software programs that I originally was looking at, and some of them were kind of thrown out of the mix when I contacted organizations that were using them, and they said, run like the wind.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know that we also go to always speak of ROIs, and I understand it's very important, but I also liked how you pointed out the fact about efficiencies, because that's exactly where my mind went when this was in that. I mean, it's a very bold change, obviously, but in the scheme of things, this is going to be quite an efficient, like you say, efficient thing for us, and I'm so totally on board with this.
Thank you.
Any other questions about code? So planning, the personnel has a status quo. I think there might be a slight couple of hours difference in the allocation of the admin support. But it's essentially our one town planner whose job is to support existing development, the planning board, and also town council as it implements the comprehensive plan, and as we develop ordinances. This budget includes an increase in professional development. Our planner has been with us for a couple of years. We have dialed back the consulting support that he would normally get and are instead encouraging him in this budget to continue his professional development through professional service, professional groups. We think it will help him stay on topic with some of the bigger issues facing planning today. This was actually a discussion. One of the things that did get cut out of the initial budget was an increase in wage for the planner. In our midterm goals, we would like to make his salary a little bit more competitive. If you look at other communities with full-time planners, he is at the lower end of the wage. But given the economic issues, we put that on hold and instead suggested that we invest a little bit in his professional development. And there is an overall a small decrease in the department. Questions about planning?
I just had one at the very end where, and it's just more of an explanation than a question.
Sure.
It says, the very end where it says comp plan implementation 2000 on page 79, expenses associated with implementing the comp plan. What would be an example of some expenses that,
Sure.
I was thinking that all of it was expenses
Yeah.
associated with the comp plan.
Well, no. This would be specific to any special mapping, any special research that had to be done that we had to go out of house for. If we needed a legal review on a question around the comp plan, that's where that would come from. Honestly, if we needed to buy some of Evan's time to bring him back a little bit, that's where that would probably come from as well.
Thank you.
Other questions? Am I going too fast or just right? Tom says
right.
no. So economic development, as we talk about every year, the economic development, we present it in two ways, kind of like our two sets of books, right? Our cash books and our accrual books. We present economic development as a piece of community development as one complete budget, which this year was about $881,000. That is one way we present it. Then we turn around and we present it as broken out by the TIF districts that support the budget, because the entirety of economic development is supported through the tax increment financing districts. Every year we have to look at our work plan for each of the individuals that might be supported by the TIF districts in terms of their wages and benefits. And the reason for that is what we can only pay for economic development out of the TIF districts. So depending on people's work plans, like last year, my salary got cut back what was paid for out of the TIF district because I was doing more general town administration, which is not economic development. Last year, we created the Deputy Community Development Director position, which we allocated split position. It's Parks and Rec and Community Development. And what we said was a lot of Parks and Rec is actually economic development the way we've run it. It's marketing, it's working with the business community, it's putting on community events. And we've really seen that position grow in the last year. During this particular emergency, the deputy director position has become a critical component to the economic development response and business support. So what this budget, as far as economic development does, is shifts even more of the community development, the deputy's time, into community development, and paying 30 hours a week out of economic development and 10 hours a week out of Parks and Recreation. We've had, I think, some extensive conversations about this. I don't know how much time you want me to spend here, or I can, you tell me. We're good?
I think we're good, Sophie. We'll probably have a discussion at Parks and Rec.
Yes. The economic development budget does include funds for a village green shade system for community events. It's $7,500. It's still in there. Wanted to point that out. It removes all of the debt reserves. In previous years, we've had kitties for debt reserve, and we were able to remove them because the TIF district is going to outlive our debt, which is a wonderful thing. And the total department request is approximately $8,000 savings. While it's always good for council to look and shave money off budgets if there are things that you don't want us to spend money on, that's always a good thing. But just be aware that as you shave money off economic development, it is not going to impact the bottom line for taxes, because this is not general fund money. Make sense? Okay.
Sophie, is there any monies left in the Village Green Foundation monies, or?
No, that's completely spent out. Took that to zero.
Sophie, I had a couple of questions if you're ready
Sure.
for them.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit about the special community events and the doubling of that line?
Yeah, the special community events line is where the shade system is for the Village Green. And I don't know if Dave and Lori want to talk about that.
I can, or
I
we'll
can too.
we can tag team it.
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
Is that what we've been experiencing during the using the Village Green since its inception? It's an awesome location, but one of the challenges that we have been experiencing every year is that the way that the sun sets to the west right there in the summertime really raises havoc with those people who are performing, and you're sitting out in the in the middle of the sun on a sunny day for those events as well. So the shade system is to be able to shade the performers during the activities that are going on there. And Lori, I'll throw it over to you.
Yeah, you've got it right. The Village Green was designed to fit into the landscape that we have, and nobody really thought about where the sun sets every afternoon. And so it is right in the performer's eyes, and it's very warm. So we were looking at putting something up. We hadn't really settled on anything. I had reached out to a couple of companies that do awnings, and we were going to meet in April or May, and that never happened. So we're not exactly sure what it looks like, but that was the plan, to try and get something that would cover the performers and possibly tip so the sun wasn't directly in their eyes.
Thank you. The other question I had related to the OEDC line, which went from 0 to 5,000, and you spoke in the explanation about increased renewed interest and will produce projects for 2021. Any additional information we can get on that?
On the packet
Sure.
we got this afternoon, that was gone.
Yes. In the packet that you got, the updated
Yep.
budget, that one was taken out.
Great, simple. Thank you.
May I, Madam Chair, make my annual clarification that the full-time salary line in the economic development is a compilation of multiple employees who are paid out of those TIFs. I didn't want anyone to get the wrong impression that your community development director was getting paid $250,000 a year.
It would be good if you could get it, Dave. I guess I have a question on the shade system. Are we really expecting to have concerts or performances on the Village Green this year?
Great.
Yeah, that remains to be seen, I think. And from what I understand, well, I guess this is in the next year's budget. I think we had been thinking about trying to get it into this year's budget. So that has not been decided. We haven't gotten to that. I think, I can't say yes or no, but given the guidelines from the state, I guess I'm seeing it would be pretty difficult to do. So, yeah.
So that gives you, if we put it in this budget, you have till July 1st of 2021
Right, I guess,
to
that.
get it installed.
To get
Correct.
it for next season, if we decide to cancel this season. Yeah.
But just to circle back around, Sophie, to a comment you made earlier, because I think that Tony Francis, one of our loyal attendees, asked a question. Even if we were to shave this off the budget, it doesn't come from general fund, so it does not impact the tax rate.
Yeah, so if we were to leave it in the budget, it would still have to come back to council for approval anyway, because it's over $5,000. And if we didn't use it, it would lapse back into the program development fund. If we shave it, then either council says to us when they shave it, still bring us back the idea next spring, or we're not interested at all. Either way, that just goes back into the program development fund. It does not impact taxes.
I'm still feeling a little bit like conservative. I don't know if we should be buying a shade system this year. That's my opinion.
So I have a question. I looked at it. It's something I circled, and like you, Tom, I also circled the OEDC, but then I was able to see that it changed in this packet we got today. So I circled that, thinking I don't imagine we're going to have concerts this summer. And I thought, oh well, for next summer, and it comes out of the TIF. So if we did not spend it out of the TIF, then we could spend it in the future. We're not obligated to spend that money at any particular rate, are we?
No.
We currently have tents too that we've put up in the past that don't quite do the trick, but there's something. So, it is something that we've done. We find that it takes a few more staff resources in order to make that happen for each concert. But anyway, that being said, we could go back to the old way for a year or so.
So am I hearing a little bit of a consensus on this one? I can only see a couple people, so that's not helping me.
My thought is, I'm with Cindy, which is things are so uncertain. And although it's not ideal to have the sun set in the eyes of our performers, we're not sure when we're going to have performers there. And perhaps the message we should be sending is that we are conservative about spending money when things are unknown. And that maybe we take this one off and look for a future year when we know we're going to have people meeting at the library to hear music.
I agree with Lori on that.
And I agree too.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's really a political decision because it doesn't impact the tax rate. It doesn't, keeping it in the budget doesn't mean that it's going to be approved by council in the future. It can be added back in at any time. If it's going to cause, people to get distressed because they don't understand that it doesn't impact the tax rate, then it's not worth keeping it in at this time.
I'm in agreement as well.
All right. So we will add that to the revision list.
Thank
Good.
you.
Any other economic development questions?
I had the same thing, and it's just a clarification more than anything. The business support, the $10,000 that was approved last year, and it's associated with creation of support. What, again, like specifically, what does that funding, what does that $10,000 do? And is there a community-wide advocacy group at the moment?
So I can tell you that's been something Dave has been working on for the last 18 months. Wouldn't you say, Dave? Do you want to
Yes.
take that one?
Sure. No, it's it is a wider, probably a wider support mechanism. Cheryl, part of that, those funds, the monies that we spent to support businesses, advertising with humane athletic sports have come out of that account. It's more of a broader marketing budget, that if we can provide marketing opportunities for the businesses in town, that we can help partner with them. That's really the larger overarching part of it. But it's also it would be funds that we would use to help with that advocacy group. If we can, every time we try to get it started, ends up being something like, COVID-19 or some other issue that makes it harder for people to get together. We meaning Mitch and I have been working on this for, as Sophie said, at least 12 months, if not probably more like 18. But this would be for the upcoming year, starting in July 1. Once we can start getting back together and working with groups, it'll be probably even more important than it was in the last year as we try to restart the economic engine for Orono, helping the businesses. My guess is that will be one that we will be working on faster, not slower.
Thank you, Dave.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
So Dave, I salute you trying to use the power of organizing businesses together to do things that they couldn't afford to do in terms of marketing as individuals. And that's what I know that you've done for the Jumbotron at the hockey games, for example. But since this COVID times, I've been invited to participate in small business meetings by Zoom, both from Efficiency Maine, I'm speaking, I am a town councilor, but I'm speaking of my experience as a business owner, which is Efficiency Maine. All of the registered vendors that work with Efficiency Maine were invited to speak in Zoom with the person who administrates the programs there. And so that there's real-time feedback from us about how our businesses are doing and what we could use, how they could help us. And the same way the Maine Small Business Association has also had Zoom meetings with small business people asking for input and where people are sharing ideas. So that would be a low-cost business support idea. And I salute you on the Facebook posts you're doing with local business owners. And I think that's a really good way to get the word out to people in Orono who we have and get their thoughts. But it wouldn't cost $10,000, but it would take time. And I know that you're already stretched quite thin. But when I saw this line item, that's what I thought of, is that your ability to bring people together and learn from them. You're an asset to our community, and this is one way you could get more input if you needed it.
Lori, I would just add to that is that there is no one $10,000 fix, and there's no one $10,000 expense. This is a cumulative expense. It may be $500 for this, $500 for that, $2,000 for this. It is simply a budget that that I have every year to work with businesses. How can we help them? If there's a program that will help us that, quite frankly, doesn't cost anything, I'm usually grabbing those. So, and I've been involved with Efficiency Maine for several years. So I'm certainly aware of different opportunities, as I said. So it's more of a think of it as a upper limit, not a one-time or a one-item expense.
This budget item seems to me to be kind of the essence of economic development, so I don't really have a problem with this one.
Other economic development questions, concerns?
I was just going to echo that. I agree with what City's statement was also.
All right, hearing none, I'm going to move forward. I think. Here we go. So let's talk a little bit about Parks and Recreation. So as we had talked with council, this budget looked at implementing that next step, that next phase, where we would move the director into more of a management role, which we're assuming would take about 10 hours a week of pure Parks and Rec. Remember, one of our arguments is that a lot of what Orono Parks and Rec does fits into economic development. But about 10 hours a week of pure Parks and Rec, and adds that coordinator position. So we have that individual identified, and but we have not made a job offer yet. It also decreases program lines. So trails, we actually are funding that at 0 in this budget, with the idea that if there was absolutely necessary trail maintenance that required expense, we would take it out of the trail reserve, which right now stands at $20,000. Building repairs is reduced. Schools Landing is reduced to only include the expenses related to our membership in the Greater Pushaw Lake Association, which is really important because the towns got together and helped the association pay for all of the specialized water testing and education. So that's an important piece of our comp plan. Our special events has been decreased, with the idea that if we have special events, a lot of it would end up being funded through economic development as a community event. And the scholarships we took down to 0, understanding that if we had need, we would fund through our scholarship reserve. So this is a total request that is down $109.
Sophie, so it says the adds a coordinator plus 18,000. That's not the salary of the coordinator, though.
No, that's what the increase is in the budget. The salary for the coordinator is, it's about $18 an hour. I'd have to pull up give me just a sec. The other thing that would be important to note is if we still wanted to keep Parks and Rec, which I assume we would, if we took out the coordinator position, the net savings would be about $5,000 because we'd have to move 30 hours of Mitch or 20 hours of Mitch's time back to Parks and Rec so that we'd have somebody in the department. Give me just a sec.
Will we see any savings in UMaine contract rec sports if they don't open in July?
I think we'd have to negotiate that. Because right now, I think what we're looking at more, Cindy, is changing that, what we would offer. And in order to provide even the changed programs, I think we'd need some assistance from them.
Sophie, if
Mhm.
I can just add, that is specific to sports programming, that 15,000. The relationship that we have as far as summer camp is different based on the fact that that is more of a revenue sharing situation. So the 15,000 is strictly for operations of our sports programming. So clearly, if that wasn't going to happen in the fall, which usually starts when school gets back in the September stuff, we certainly need to look at that. But those two are different things. Camp and sports programming are two different things.
So, Cindy, to answer your question, the total cost of a coordinator expense is $55,015.
And what is the revenue offsetting the rec sports or the day camp? Do we break even, or are we always at a loss for both of those?
So on summer camp, we would be at about $10,000 on a normal year, right, Mitch? Of revenue, pure revenue that we would expect
Yep.
to get. And as far as sports, we don't get any revenue from the youth sports. We pay $15,000 and the university keeps the revenue. So it's a $15,000 expense every year, Cindy, with no offset.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Something to think about.
Yep. You want to continue on?
I guess so.
We've identified some other things to talk about, but I thought we'd do that after we go through the last two departments, if that works.
Sure.
Okay. So the municipal pool in the budget, this budget delays the pool opening until July 6th. And when it does open, there's only open swim and lap or family swim. No swim lessons involved, budgeted for based on the 6 feet of social distance and the fact that swim instructors usually are touching their people that they're teaching how to swim. And it's a total request decrease of about $8,100. I will tell you, and I'm going to pass this along to Mitch, because Mitch and Jeff Lowe have been on the question of, can we open the pool, and if so, what does it look like? I will tell you that this is not a quick conversation, that Mitch and I have spent hours talking about this. We've made inquiries into the Department of Labor, been moved to the CDC. Hopefully we'll have a discussion with CDC and the Parks and Rec directors from across the state. But municipal swimming pools are a really hot topic these days. So I'm going to pass it along to Mitch to share with us what he knows.
So that's a little bit of a tall order about what I actually know after 8 weeks of researching this and trying to get answers. What I do know is that there was guidance that came out in the governor's last guidance on last Wednesday, but it was not specific to municipal pools. It was actually tucked into either day camps or youth sports or non-professional sports, with less than a page of guidelines. What the challenge is that nobody knows quite how to handle them because they're not necessarily a business. So they've been trying to fit it in somewhere. And the challenge with that is that our pool is more like a water park in the sense that that's where people congregate. And so with that said, they have given guidance that water parks and beaches and things like that shouldn't be open based on the information they have right now. But because we're a pool, they don't necessarily fit underneath that. Some of the challenges that are presented is the first ones are, obviously is a 6 feet. The size, the gathering number is 50 people. That would include everybody, and we'd have to keep 6 foot social distance. And frankly, I'm not sure how you do that in a pool, in open swim, without a lot of whistleblowing. So that's part of it. The other parts are how people enter and exit the facility, how cleaning is done around touch points, which there are a lot. Everybody often talks about the water and how the water and this chlorine, and they're absolutely right. The chlorine itself, there's no studies that say that it will live in the chlorine, but the problem is that not everybody is in the pool and all the places that they touch and all the places that they are. So some of those challenges just from the public coming, like I said, are the cleaning. We have to have showers by code to have the pool. Now you have a locker room situation that you have to limit numbers in. So you have to monitor all that stuff. And then the other side of this whole thing, and frankly, the place that concerns me the most is our employees, our lifeguards. They are first responders, and in any case of emergency, could be asked to do first aid and CPR in very close quarters with not a lot of protection in normal circumstances. So trying to understand what that is and what the risks are for our staff is a place that I am frankly pretty concerned about, because I'm not sure how we can offer that. Obviously, you can't wear masks in a pool. It's hard to wear masks, and you can't do CPR with masks. Now they do have masks and they do have bags that you could do CPR with, but part of the challenge is when you do CPR is actually when people are exhaling. It's not the breath in, it's more what comes out after that. So there are some pieces there that we're trying to work through, and I guess, and trying to look at. I think there are lots of, in my multiple conversations with across the state, there are lots of different thoughts on what people are going to do with their municipal pools. Some are not opening, some are going to open. And with the lack of guidance, some people are making up kind of what they think they should do as best practices, which, that is a little bit of a challenge, and I hope that we can get more clarity, and I've been hoping for clarity for a little bit here and haven't received any, so.
Hey, and Mitch, I know I was doing a little bit too online today, and I know Augusta has closed their pools, like they've just made a decision, just not going to do it. And the other thing too that I think we talked about before we started this budget process was that safety was going to be part of our guiding, our guiding principles. I would have to say that not opening the pool this summer would be a very wise idea. I mean, I know people aren't going to like it, but it's just too difficult. And I was thinking even like going up this, going up the ladder, like putting hands on ladders, like would you have somebody behind you with a squirt bottle, kind of cleaning? I mean, it seems like a monumental task to try to keep that as safe as possible for our kids and our community.
So our thought, Cheryl, was just kind of stepping off from what you're talking about, is that the need doesn't go away. The ability for us to do that safely, I don't think we can. I would tend to agree. I've got some real concerns about how we can do that safely. But the need doesn't go away, that there is a group of, and it's not a small group, of 10 to 14-year-olds, let's say, who that is where they spend the bulk of their summer. And so one of the things that Mitch and I are looking at and talking with the university about is there an avenue for us to do some alternative outdoor, less structured kind of programming, more drop-in kind of programming. So if the council was in agreement that we shouldn't open the pool, it now allows us to shift our resources, maybe be able to take care of some expenses with TIF money around childcare, right, Dave? Yep, yep. As long as we're careful about the geography of where that is. So I think making this decision is really important, that we get some guidance from council whether or not we should be trying to find a way, or if we're satisfied that this is a hurdle that is too high to climb and to ensure that we could do it safely, and now it's time to shift our gears to start looking at alternative, low cost, reasonable programming for kids.
Yeah, I mean, we have this discussion about the pool. I mean, not this discussion about the pool every year, obviously, but we have a discussion like this every year about its budget line. It is an amenity straight up. It doesn't bring anything to the community other than it makes something nice in the community for people to do in the summertime and for kids and families. And, but it's an expensive amenity, but it's one that the town has felt and the community has felt it's worth keeping. But I agree with Cheryl. I mean, it seems, impossible, the task to keep everybody who works there and who goes there safe. It just seems like this just isn't the year to potentially put people's lives at risk or make an unsafe situation when we could just maybe press pause on this budget line item for this year.
By not opening until July 6th, how many weeks have we saved on the, so we're probably looking at about 6 weeks the pool is open?
7 weeks, very, very good counting, but yeah.
7, the report said 7 instead of 10.
Yep. So just to make sure people are aware that there is going to be some amount of maintenance that we would need to do with the pool, probably, to get it cleaned out and at least partially filled, and then dumped after that. Just so you're aware, we don't want beautiful, pristine water just sitting there with nobody in it, but we also need to make sure we flush the system. So it will be good for next year.
Yeah.
All right, so it sounds like that seems like consensus that we've got a path forward. Am I right about that?
Are we talking just about the pool right now, or the whole Parks and
The
Rec?
pool, the pool.
I agree with the pool. I think a question about a line in the Parks and Rec when we get it.
I sadly agree about the pool.
Yeah, I think we set up sprinklers next. But I think it makes sense not to open the pool.
So we will come back with some ideas for what we might be able to do in its place. Ready to move on? Or you want to have more Parks and Rec discussion?
I had one quick question about, this is a pretty small line in here that was cut, but the community arts, what was that funding for? I realized that we need to trim things, But the support that creates for the kind of the culture of the community, I think, is key. And I am slightly concerned of the message we're sending with that too. So where does this funding typically go?
So that funding typically paid for lights at the Keith Anderson, or, you know, some supporting the community theater. That used to be community theater stipend. We don't have a community theater planning to use that we're aware of this year, and I'm not aware of anything that has to be fixed if somebody did come in and we suddenly could gather. So we're not aware of any fund need for that.
Gotcha. So this is because some theater company moved out of Keith Anderson. That funding didn't go elsewhere. It wasn't like support for some of the community festivals that happen or anything like that.
No, Sam, I tend to either, if Mitch doesn't have money in his special projects line or his community events line, I will fund requests like that out of my professional services line.
Great, thank you. I wasn't quite sure where that funding was. I had a feeling it was related to some theater company moving to Bangor.
It's always good to ask a question.
I do that sometimes.
And we still have 3,000 in the programming and events line too.
Yep. The more we can work with other groups, we are able to stretch that $3,000 quite a bit more. So we enjoy doing that when, for example, Stillwater Community Arts, we find ways to support them that it not usually a direct contribution, which allows us to kind of absorb it into the budget, like with crossing guards or signs or something.
No, I think that's great. We're just like, beautification, the 1,500 there is very important for the town. I think the things we could do to, the vibrancy of the community is important too. Even though we are in dark times, I think it's even more important.
Hear you.
Great.
We ready to move on or more discussion? Okay. So the library, the lion's share, excuse me, let me just get there. So the increase in the library comes from two places, primarily. We had a wage increase last year that was promised last year. One contractual and the other was bringing 3 people who were the lowest paid town employees up onto the regular wage scale. And then the second was contributions, a change in health insurance selection was the other major driver. So in order to bring the budget in at the level it is right now, we have a vacancy. Our circulation manager has tendered a resignation and will be leaving on June 1st. So the budget right now contemplates leaving that vacant through September 30th. That's about 30% of the hours that are gone. A little bit less than that, 27% of the hours in the department. So it's a significant amount of staffing. The budget also removed all out-of-state professional development. Lori had indicated that she was willing to forego this past year, this next year, and also the children's librarian, who often will be able to go out of state for professional development, has indicated that they're fine with skipping that for the year. I'm not even sure that those venues will actually happen.
Right.
So the total request is an increase of $7,800. I'd like for Lori to talk for just a little bit, because she and Mitch are the ones, I think, that have the most challenge trying to figure out how to chart a path forward in this COVID-19 time. And I think she could speak to kind of her general plan. We do not have a timeline, so we're still working on that, but the general plan for moving forward.
Right, so I can talk about that first, and later if you have questions about what that decrease in staffing looks like for us. I can go into that as well. So we've been taking guidance from the Maine State Library. They've been doing a weekly Zoom meeting to let us know what they're learning through federal sources as well as state sources. And they're still not recommending opening. There's a phased steps that we are following. There are libraries out there that have already started curbside, and I came to you a couple weeks ago with my idea around curbside that we are putting into place. We're still waiting for the lockers to arrive, but we have been working to set up the community room as a circulation area and as a way of processing curbside deliveries. So we're not sure exactly when that's going to start. My hope is sometime early to mid-June that we will start curbside. The staff is part-time back at the library doing work inside the building. We've got 2 teams, one working Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the other working Tuesday, Thursday. So if something were to happen, at least one team wouldn't be out of commission. So the next question is the facility. When do we open that? And like Mitch in the pool, it's hard to see how we could possibly do it safely. One of the thoughts is, you know, how do we invite children in, not being able to kind of monitor what they're touching, who they're hugging, you know, whatever. And then just the general public. There are so many things that in a library that people touch, and they don't just take one thing and leave. They want to browse, they want to look through magazines and newspapers. And until we really know how we can possibly keep everything sanitary, I don't have a date. I'm not sure when we can do that. It also involves restrooms. How do we assure that those are clean after each use, and flat surfaces? So there are just so many things to consider in opening the library. The next step would probably be taking appointments for computer use. There are people out there who probably don't have access to computers and or Wi-Fi, and need to maybe apply for unemployment or look for a job or fill out that census that, you know, people that are being asked to do this year. So that would probably be the next step. What I'm really curious about is to see how the curbside goes, to see how many people we can service in that way, and then make some decisions day by day on, you know, what the recommendations are health-wise, and what we can possibly provide. I think I've covered that, everything that we're thinking about at this point. I welcome questions if I've missed things.
I had a question about your discussion of funding that comes from the federal and state level. I understand you're very clear in your narrative that the president's 2020 budget targets the only federal funds for library programs for complete elimination, which is horrifying. But you mentioned also LD 1149, which is, in my understanding, it's legislation that has increased funding to share resources between libraries. And I think we talked about it a little at last year's budget, but can you talk a bit about why you see this could potentially be funding that goes away in the future?
Yeah, this was an issue last year for sure. It was in the forefront. And unfortunately my old version got put in before my new version. So that if you looked at my new version of my OMR, that is not there. But there's always the threat of losing funding. And while we no longer get a stipend, it used to be that public libraries got a stipend from the state. We get so many services from the state: interlibrary loan, our cloud library, the online databases. There's just so much that we take for granted that we're getting from the state. If that were to go away, then it could be a problem. It would be a trickle-down problem. And yeah, at the federal level, it's always a threat. So, and yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And Lori, have you seen an increase in like online services?
Oh, absolutely.
This all happened? Do you know
Yeah.
about percentage wise, like how many?
Yep, 50%. of,
Okay, more
how about-
people are
we're looking at
accessing.
RB Digital. So that's the service that people can log on and watch Acorn TV for free, as well as great courses and a number of other services. But I would say Acorn TV is the one that gets the most use,
That
as
people
well as
are-
online magazines. And
What
those
about the-
services.
What about your courses that you have, the digital courses that I think you implemented last year?
Yeah, that's through RB Digital, the great courses. Is that what you're talking about?
Right.
Yeah. That's
you-
getting some use, and I would say it's up 50%. Yeah, people are using it.
Do you think that it would be trying to tie it into school somehow? Do you think it would be up more if schools went online in September? Or, I mean, is there a connection?
So the great courses really are designed more
Adults.
for adults. And oftentimes it's older adults who want to kind of delve into a area that they didn't get to in their work life. You know, they want to study art history. So there's this wonderful series of classes on art history. I see that that's the use for that. Louise certainly is in conversations with Emily Jackson Sanborn and how we can combine services or assist each other. And certainly that, if the school goes to online learning in the fall, we certainly would be talking to her on how we could be supportive or assist them in that. What role we could take certainly would be part of the conversation.
Good. I had I had another question that was more specific to training.
Yep.
And I'm on page 91. So $3,000 for training, and then a Leader Institute, another $2,000. Do you think those conferences will go this year?
No, I don't know, but those are the things that we've cut out at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a conference for youth services librarians every other year that Louise had signed up for, but I just asked for her registration back. So
Okay.
that's out of this year's budget. And then there was as part of my contract, we've put in, I go to the Public Library Association conference every other year. And on the second year, with Sophie's approval, I can go to another conference. And I'm just saying she didn't give me approval this year, so.
Okay. Thanks, Lori.
So Cheryl, just so you're aware, on the back side of the new budget summary, there's a list of changes that have been made in the budget.
So I can also speak to what our service level is going to look like without the circulation manager for at least through September. So currently we are open Monday through Saturday for a total of 42 hours. And what we would look at is a Tuesday through Saturday schedule with a total of 30 hours. So pretty much 6 hours a day. The circulation manager is one of the 3 full-time positions, and that position is integral in having the interlibrary loan service work seamlessly. So that position makes sure that we are in compliance with Maine Infonet, with all of their policies and procedures, making sure that things come and go smoothly, contact with other libraries. It seems like a very simple system, but there's a lot of background that goes into it. So we've gone through her tasks and divvied them up among the staff. We're all happy to chip in, but what that is going to result in is fewer hours and time for programming. We have been trying hard to see what virtual programming looks like, or what kind of program we can offer without inviting people into the building. And I think we're going to have to put some of that on hold while we make sure that materials get to patrons. That's going to be our first priority. So if it went on for a year, it would continue to look that way. So that's what we're looking at least for the next few months.
So Lori, because the library is not open, that doesn't affect this service level?
Not really. It's amazing how much we have to do. You know, when we all went home to work, that was a thought that maybe we wouldn't have enough to do, but we certainly do. And I think partly is trying to figure out how to provide services in this new world. I would say our one desk clerk who works 13 hours a week, that's his number one priority, is wait on the public. And if anyone, he's one that hasn't been able to fill as many hours, although Sophie came up with a project for him one week. And so we're trying to keep him busy. But once we're in the library doing curbside, that's certainly going to take up, we don't know how much time it's going to take up because it's such a different way of doing things. And that's one reason why I want to really take the time to just offer curbside before we go to appointments, to see what resources we need to do this. But what we're hearing hands down from patrons is they just want materials. They're very understanding that we're closed, but they're anxious for materials to start flowing again.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to do it in a gradual manner.
Well, and just the safety issue. Earlier, Mitch and I were talking about how even though we're different, there's some similarities, and how do you monitor or control what individuals are doing within the space? You know, you can ask for 6 feet different, you know, space, but how do you monitor that? And how do you monitor that with children? It's just something we're not sure how to do safely. And I guess that's what I want. I want the public's trust that what we're doing everything we can to provide a service in a safe and healthy manner, with both staff and the public being considered.
Other questions for Lori?
I'm sorry, well, the sun keeps on following me. I think I need a shade. I have one window, I can't pull the shade on. I'll move over.
I hear you, Lori. I'm doing the same
Yeah,
thing.
you're doing it too.
All right. We ready to move to facilities?
I think so.
So facilities is status quo for people. It does create a new cost center of life safety in the budget. Life safety was kind of commingled in with everything else, and we actually have changed the responsibility to oversee that to our life safety inspector, Rob St. Louis. And so instead of trying to share a budget, which is really hard when somebody's responsible for the bottom line, we've kind of pulled out the cost center of life safety, which Rob will be responsible for. At the end, even with that new cost center, this is a decrease of about $6,800 in this budget. There are some small reductions in contract cleaning and HVAC maintenance. The one thing that the budget does not include, it includes money to pay for the 5-year mandatory sprinkler test. It does not include any money if we fail that test. And there is a cost associated with flushing the system that we've run into in the past. So just for council to be aware. Any questions for me or for Dave?
Is this test on every building?
So if you recall, we've kind of been going through buildings with mixed results. This test is just for the municipal building this year. So that's the one that public safety failed last year, that we had to spend $15,000 to flush and repair the system.
So we're not in the TIF district with our municipal building.
We cannot. We are barred from using TIF funds for this purpose. Even though we are in the district, we're barred. Unfortunately, they didn't leave any wiggle room, or else we would have wiggled.
So if we do fail, you have thoughts where it would come from?
Probably major maintenance reserve, which will pretty much clean out that reserve. I'm hoping that we're not going to fail.
It's always good to hope.
Yeah. But I mean, if worse came to worse, we've got a little bit of contingency in this budget in the council contingency account. What we've done, if we do the test earlier in the year, we can pay to have it fixed, take it out of the building repairs, and then watch the rest of the budget to see if we can reduce expenditures around it so that it will, we can absorb it in the budget even though it's a line item overrun. You know, we've done all sorts of kind of things around that, Cindy, and then sometimes come back and say, well, we couldn't, so we're going to need to reallocate, you know, a certain amount in the budget. It just seemed unfortunate to ask for a budget line with $15,000 or $20,000 in it that we didn't know we were going to need. That just seemed like raising money that we might not need.
Great.
Questions around? Oh,
Yes, I have a question about the Keith Anderson Community House. Obviously, so Councilor Perry and I were in the middle of a subcommittee project this winter with engineers and looking at, you know, all these different systems. Obviously, there's a lot that needs to be put on hold, but there's also a lot of work, particularly to the exterior of the building, that's essential to complete before the building itself is actually damaged. And I see that the line item for repairs and maintenance to the building is unchanged from last year. It's $2,500, and it's noted as costs associated with repairs and maintenance of interior and exterior of the building. My question is, what is the plan exactly, do you think, for the maintenance or upkeep of the exterior of the building if that is supposed to cover sort of everything inside and out?
so a couple of years ago, we had put everything on hold and gone through and replaced the things that were rotting, that had to be fixed. This is a holding pattern at this point because the question was, you know, there was a suggestion that we should just vinyl side it. That kind of, this is a historic building. Do we really want to do that? Is what kind of drove this whole idea. So we have the report back, but the committee has not met again since the COVID, well, since winter, really. Tom got back and we were going to meet and we just haven't. If we did a major renovation that turned that into a true community, you know, like we had a plan, like had Dave Mylan and Mitch work on a business plan for the future of the community house, and it was truly a community space, then we could, if we needed to borrow money, we could pay that back with TIF funds. Barring that, we really have to do whatever maintenance on the general fund dime. The problem is, just for citing, the quote I heard for not even not spectacular quality, just to get it cited, was like $65,000. I mean, it was a huge amount of money because it's such a big building. So that's the long-winded way of saying there is no contemplation for Keith Anderson House. In fact, one of the things that I have on your list of things to think about are, you know, we keep stretching and not being able to maintain things. Is it time for us to look at alternative ownership of things, whether it be to sell things or to find long-term leases for things? And I don't know if the Keith Anderson building lives in that place, but we're clearly at a place with it where we either need to invest a significant amount of money into it, or it's going to start really falling apart in place.
But not without a plan. We need a plan.
Yeah.
So my question is, since we're treating this sort of disastrous year as pressing pause on a lot of things, do you feel like we're in a position to at least maintain the holding pattern so that we're not seeing serious destruction to the building if we press pause?
So my understanding is that we can press pause for another 12 months, but that then it's kind of kicking that can. And I think we're at the end of the runway to be able to continue to do that. Dave, would you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Definitely. It does need some work. We did do some renovation to the interior of it. We found some broken beams that we had repaired, jacked back into place. But there is some significant things going on outside that need to be addressed. So, yeah, kicking the can another 12 months, you know, we're stretching it. But I think we'll make it through just fine.
So outside, you mean roofing and siding?
Roofing was done approximately 5 to 7 years ago, but siding, yes. And structural, you know, decorative things like the trim in the front of the building and or the facade out front, that's starting to fall apart. When we did the window covers, the stained glass window covers, we put a lot of that back together. But that was just merely temporary. We tried to seal it the best we could to keep the elements out of it. But like I said, that was just temporary. It really needs to be reworked.
Tom, as the chair of that committee, how do you feel?
I'm not sure I'm the chair of that committee, but let me see. Yeah, I don't think we have any choice but to keep this pause on, and hopefully we can get together. John McCormick did a tremendous job of lining up people to do some engineering and architectural work for us this year. We have a lot of information. I think we've got a lot of the information that we need, and we can do some additional planning in the meantime, and hopefully be ready to do something more significant in another year.
I think the key to that too will be to look at not just what needs to be done now that we kind of have that information, but also what could we use the building for, so that we might be able to leverage some funds outside of Orono.
Yep.
I had a question for Dave Mylan in the sense of, would this be ripe for a public-private partnership situation where we might get a sponsor or brand it or something like that?
Dave Mylan?
Interesting suggestion. Nothing is impossible, and it very well may be that something we could certainly, I'd be happy to look into.
Good idea.
Cindy, I would just suggest that going back to understanding what we're going to use it for would really help figure out who that partner could be. And I think part of the challenge that we've had in that building, even when looking at it, is it is an old building and there are limitations to what we can do there, even just fixing it. So I think we're really going to have to get back to understanding what we want to use it for, what it can be used for, and trying to target those right people. And I'd just add, John McCormick has been fabulous in this whole thing. And I think where we ended up is we got a report from an architect of some rough estimates just about the beginning of the year, and we never got back together. But certainly we can resurrect that in the year to hit the ground running when we're ready to. So,
Considering that Tom can join us from Moosehead, I think we're in good stead.
And can I ask just one more question about that building? Is it eligible for historic grants, like renovation grants? I'm not even sure if there's anything out there.
Yeah, there's been too much work, non-historical stuff done to the building for it to qualify for that.
Oh, that's too bad.
All right, more facilities discussion?
Sophie, I had a question about the senior center.
Sure.
I haven't really heard anything about what's happening there. I imagine it's the same as the pool and the library. Nothing is going on at the senior center. What's happening?
So, right now, the town, RSU 26, and the Housing Foundation are partnering to put out senior meals. And so they get delivered down to the senior center and redistributed from there. So I know that they have, from every once in a while, 4 days a
Yep.
week, they are in there to just simply pack meals and get them set up to be delivered. Beyond that, we are not running any programs. In fact, we're asking people who normally would be in the space not to be in the
Right.
space. We have allocated our facilities people to be trying to do more cleaning and keeping public safety, public works in the town office. And now we're gonna have to add the library back in now that they're back down there. So we don't have enough resource to be doing any more than just very basic cleaning down there.
Is there a, well, never mind. I imagine when people open, it'll come up again.
Yep.
So, thank you,
The-
Sophie.
The thrift shop is not open, I assume?
The thrift shop is not open. As the state begins to allow businesses to open up, we'll have to figure out what what our minimum requirements will be in terms of how people will be able to use space.
Yeah.
Because, the Health Association pretty much, they have the top floor, and the Historical Society has out front, and the Housing Foundation uses the kitchen and the dining room, and then we have people who rent it other times. So it's a busy building that gets lots of use, and we're going to have to give it some real clear thought how to keep people safe. Ready to continue on?
I think we are.
Well, I hit the wrong button. There we go. So the things that we had identified, we've already talked about not opening the pool, which seems like something we're going to move forward with. Staff was not so bold as to add to the budget not opening the ice rink, but that's $3,000. Beautification expenses for the spring would be $1,500. If we left the rec coordinator position vacant, it would save total about $5,000 because we'd be shifting Mitch's salary back into Parks and Rec, unless the idea was to not. And if you did that, that completely guts Parks and Rec, and there is no way to manage the skeleton that we have, that we're trying to now build upon. Leaving the library position vacant through the end of the year would cut about $42,000 from the existing budget, and then to decrease library outreach by 30%, which would be kind of what Lori is saying. Without that staff person, she wouldn't have the staff to be able to do outreach, which would be about $1,300. So those were the service level reductions that we had identified. Happy to talk about these or any that you would like us to model for you.
Is that slide correct? Is that 6/30/2020 or 6/30/2021?
Oh, that slide is not correct. We should be in the next year. 2021, sorry.
You save that much money in 5 weeks. I don't know.
That would be nice, but no. No. Sorry, Sam.
I don't see the reasoning for not opening the ice rink.
The only reason would be to save $3,000.
We're not worried about social distancing or anything at that point.
No, I think in that environment outside, I think you're a lot easier to maintain social distance.
I recall that in this past year, it was a challenge because of the fluctuations in the winter temperature. the ice rink did it take more to manage, or just that it was not open as often because
We
wasn't-
couldn't keep it open because it would go so warm and then rain, and it just, if you don't get a really, really good base, thick base, and people see the temperature as being under 32 degrees and think it should be frozen, but with the sun, if it got above 25 or so, we would start to lose the ice.
and that so the cost was $3,000 even if we didn't get much use out of it already last year.
Well, it's what the budget is for it. And the bulk of what we pay for is actually electricity. And that electricity, it's our service drop that we pay for, that the school, Penobscot Valley Ski Club, and the town use.
So
You're muted.
$3,000 is a share of what the cost to run it, the electricity to run it?
No, that's all of it. It's got one electric drop, so it's our bill.
Sophie, just thinking about, when we look at, I get the cut beautification expenses, but is this probably a good opportunity for us going forward to have like adopt a garden, or where we get the community involved in the beautification of our town as opposed to being a town expense? Is that something we could kind of look at?
Sure. Especially since we've expended money for this season, so it's something we could work on through this year for next season. So this $1,500 would be expended in April, May, June of next year, not this year.
Okay. Great.
I do think we need to remember, though, that the maintenance and the work in those gardens is totally volunteer work. And I'm not sure that you're going to find that the people who are already volunteering significant amounts of time to plant and weed and maintain them are going to be very excited about, now we've got to go out and pay for this stuff too.
So I would, Tom, just suggest a couple of things. First, the items on this list are the things that are really council service level decisions, which is why they're here, and they weren't in the budget, number one. Number two, I wouldn't ask volunteers to do that. I would see this more as a Mitch, Dave, a community and economic development initiative to pay to, so it's more of like adopt a highway. DOT isn't out asking people to do that. There is another arm of the state that does that. Because I agree with you, and I'd much rather ask people for money than weed.
I'd like to go back to the staffing issues and the fact that we have a couple of vacancies. We have so many unknowns at this point in terms of revenue. I just think we have to give some serious thought to whether we fill positions that are vacant. I know we're postponing hiring somebody for the library, but again, I'm not suggesting we make that decision tonight. But but excuse me, I think that the only place there is significant money in our budget is personnel, and if we're not willing to look at that, we're really not going to be able to make much progress in reducing things, especially where revenue is such a big question.
So I totally hear what you're saying, Tom, and I think the decision to fill or not fill is really, it's a council decision. I will say that the rec coordinator position, I think, is really important, simply because as we look at the next 6 to 8 months, economic development is going to be really, really busy. I don't see the extreme spike in that workload changing. And when I look at the dollars saved or reduced by not hiring that position and keeping the rec director the way he is, talking about $5,000. And
Right.
that, with that position, I now have somebody that can go off and help organize some of these alternative summer programs that we are talking about, and start to take over the Parks and Rec side so that we can do more of the economic development piece and pay for the larger salary out of the TIF.
I understand that. I really wasn't thinking of that position. I was thinking,
I hear you. You and I have had this conversation.
yep.
Yeah, the library position is such a tough call because I know from experience that just because in-person services are reduced doesn't mean that it makes the workload lighter. In fact, it's usually, in my experience this semester teaching, it was the opposite. I don't like that as a society. When we need to cut budgets, the first thing we go after are the arts, are the libraries. These things are often the first to go because there are people who think that they're frivolous or that they're not as important as some other things. And
Yeah.
that really troubles me. But it also, it also does, this is a budget where we are going to have to make decisions about reducing service levels to the community in a way that's going to be very noticeable for them. And this would be one of them, where we're talking about really reducing the community's access to the library. I mean, even though the community's access to the library is no doubt going to be quite changed by all of the safety precautions that will be necessary going forward. But it is a very, I don't like the idea of it in any way. But I agree with Tom that it's something that I don't think we need to make a decision tonight either, but I think that it's something that we have to seriously consider.
I appreciate the difficult position, that the council is in on this one. And I appreciate the support on and knowing, how much work there is to do besides waiting on patrons. It's kind of, it's been an eye opener for us to see how we knew how much background work there was, but we interspersed the working with patrons, and we just don't know what it's going to look like. Our service has changed. So for me to tell you what our service will look like without this position, it's hard for me to do that. I do know that the staff will be stretched. And on top of that, many of the daily tasks that didn't take a lot of professional training have been done by volunteers. We have said for years we would be out straight without these volunteers. Well, we're not inviting those volunteers back yet. Most of them are in the older age range, so we haven't invited them back. So we'll be doing those tasks as well. And those tasks are associated with the interlibrary loan and the delivery system. So we're really not sure what we're going to look like. And I appreciate you wanting to hold on to this position. And if the decision is made to wait until next year, we can live with that for sure. But we look forward to replacing that position next year.
Sure. And I guess the only reason that I was looking at that and the public works position were that we're going to have vacancies there, and we have such a valuable staff. I hate to think of reducing people. So one way of trying to make some adjustments is looking at where we might have vacancies, wherever it might be, whether it's the police department or the library or public works.
Could there be a possibility? Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy, you broke up, but I don't want to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with Tom that I would rather look at how can we work without filling a position than riffing a position. So that's my kind of baseline.
Right.
We can do.
Is there middle ground on this? Could there be a fill this position beginning in January or something like that?
So ultimately, council gets to decide what it wants to do. I will tell you that, and I think I said this in the document that I sent you earlier, that we have trimmed, we have reorganized, we have done everything in our power to absorb losses of revenue over the last several years. And we're at a point where at least my take was that council wanted to get as close to zero on the increase on the town side as we could. And that's the 300 and what did I say? $360,000, maybe it was 390, sorry. $1,000 gap right now. And we are, I don't know how we get there without pausing. And I will tell you, I think that the library is an amazing amenity for the town, and what Lori does is incredible. Lori and I are approaching this with the thought that, and Rob, when you're talking about the public works position, there's going to be a noticeable decrease in the service level. And if people are gonna be willing to pause for a year while we see if the economy is gonna bounce back and get us back some of this non-property tax revenue, then it seems like a reasonable place to go.
And not that this conversation isn't sobering enough anyway already, but even if we were to not open the pool, not fill the library vacancy, and not fill the public works vacancy, that only gets us a third of the way toward a neutral impact.
So the other piece with that is the 200,000, which is the unfortunate kicking the can on North Main Avenue for one more year. So that gets you a little bit closer.
And we'll discuss that with our capital budget.
Yep, next week.
Yeah.
So Sophie, it's about 5:48. I'm thinking you had some suggestions for what you wanted to cover on Thursday. And then I don't know if you have a brief town manager's update.
My question on Thursday is, how can we best use that? 'Cause we've had these meetings where we come together, and in the past, I've always left with an idea of what you wanted me to do next, and I would bring you back a revised sheets, and we would go to the next group. We've gone through the entire public services budget. I know we're not going to open the pool, and we're not going to have a shade system, and we're going to look at maybe doing adopt a garden. What can I do to help move our process forward?
So that's what you want for Thursday, not right this very second.
No, I mean, I honestly, I didn't expect to get all the way through this, Cindy.
Okay. Okay.
I expected a lot more discussion. We have people in the community that are not happy with Parks and Rec, but when you look at Parks and Rec and you see that it's funded at $170,000 a year, there's a reason that it doesn't have all the amenities that other places have. And I think we're at a point where there really isn't trimming that can happen. And are we happy with where Parks and Rec is headed? If people are supportive of the rec coordinator position, then can I go ahead and make that higher so that I can secure the top candidate? Or do you want to hold it longer? I really don't want to walk us into a corner here.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
For Thursday? I think that we're talking about 3 vacancies that filling them or not filling them is going to have a pretty big impact on what the community experiences living here in Orono. Whether it's, you know, the service level of our Parks and Rec department, whether it's what the library is going to look like and what access will be available to patrons. And then with the public works, which we haven't really talked about. I mean, we've referred to it, but the public might not understand what we're talking about. The general gist there is that it would cause a delay in a snowstorm as to whether the sidewalks would get cleared, because it's not our legally mandated responsibility to clear the sidewalks. So it would be a delay in sidewalks. Could it maybe be helpful for you to get guidance about, or for us to make decisions about filling or not filling these positions, and for the public to get more understanding of the impact that these choices will have on life in Orono and our economic development and our services, and you know, to take those positions 1, 2, 3 and look at their actual impact on the community, so we can talk about the pros and cons, so people can really understand, you know, what's going on.
If you're willing to do that, that would be great.
Yep.
And Sophie, I totally appreciate the overview that you sent out, just the narrative, very long, with all the little,
yeah,
you know,
That
colored
Carol,
graphs and bars and things like that. But I did get a chance to, like, you know, kind of highlight some stuff and just annotate, you know, some questions. I wouldn't have a problem just kind of going over that on Thursday. It doesn't have to be long, but there were some things that, and they'll probably come back up again.
sure.
But if we have some time, I wouldn't mind going over that real quick.
That makes
Would
good-
it
Cheryl-
help, Cheryl, to, like, if I looked at helping to facilitate that discussion by having the charts and the graphs to go through, would that kind of help?
If you
Drive
want
that.
to, I've got them, I mean, we've got them in front of us, but if the
Well,
public is interested in.
I think the screen share that you did, because I was on the same page as you, Cheryl, I wanted to put this up because people in the chat have been talking about how the Parks and Recs services have gone down over the years. And what you can see is over time, that's the money that comes to us from the state, and it's gone down since 2009. It's been significantly lower than the 5% revenue sharing the state is supposed to be giving the municipalities. So the state has balanced their budget by not giving money back to municipalities, and we as a municipality have been trying to function with less money, and that's why things have been cut and cut. And as you said, Sophie, it's pretty spare now, and as you said, Megan, the things that we're talking about not filling are really going to have an impact on our community, the outwardly facing services that we provide. So I think it would be great for you to go over, because there were lots of good points in this report you wrote.
Happy to do that if I did all the work, so I'm happy to share it.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, so I think that makes sense. If I could have just a few minutes for a quick update.
Sure.
First, in no particular order, I want to let you know that we received a letter from Penobscot Emergency Management that Bell has been working on a grant application with them. So we were actually funded for almost $6,000 of reimbursement and funding for COVID-19 work that we had to do here. So that was really great. Staying with Belle, since she is our FEMA MEMA queen, she also had a scoping meeting this morning with representative from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And it looks like we've done a pretty good job with documenting and tracking our expenses, and we should have a fairly nice reimbursement from FEMA for our responses. She made some really good arguments with people that made them decide they're going to go argue for things that they might not be 100% on point. So I will look forward to sharing the results of her hard work as we continue. We are thinking about creating 2 FEMA requests, one that will go through the end of this fiscal year so that we can accrue it back, and then another one that would start July 1 into next year. Gould's Landing, everybody I think received a note from me that we had some health and safety concerns around Gould's Landing, and we moved to close the landing. The biggest issues, so as you're aware, Gould's Landing has been a place that we've had some historic issues with proper use of the space and overcrowding anyway. As it warmed up, it became very apparent that it was going to become a gathering spot. And at least through the end of May, you're only allowed to have 10 people places. We haven't figured out how to have porta potties in a way that comports with the expectations that the state has of us. And so we moved and shut the whole thing down to make it easier for police to manage it and enforce. It sounds like through my discussion with Belle that if we make a decision that it's important to have additional law enforcement patrols out there, at least through the end of the year, we should be able to get reimbursed for 90% of that cost. So we're probably going to go ahead and ask Josh what we can do there. You will likely see a change. I think the piece that Mitch and Belle and Dave Mylan, Josh and Jeff need to talk about is how we might transition to a permit system for Orono residents to use the park. We had talked about that in the past. This seems like a great opportunity to trial that where there's limited space available. The people who are paying for it should be the ones that can enjoy it. So
can I make a quick comment about that
yeah
issue? So I was sort of with trepidation following the comment thread on the Facebook post about the closing.
yeah
And I think that, I mean, my sense from reading those comments from the people who were angry about it is that they didn't really understand the issue of the porta potty. There were a lot of folks saying, well, just put one on there, problem solved, or, you know, why doesn't the town get its act together and just take care of it? And it's, I think it's more complicated, and the post maybe didn't fully make that clear. So I wonder if, to reach that same audience, if we could perhaps, I don't know if amending the post or adding another comment to the thread, so that it's visible, just to explain more about the town's liability in terms of keeping sanitary facilities safe for people and not exposing them to the virus. Because I read a horrifying fact the other day that the human body continues to shed the virus for like a very long time after people are actually recovered. So bathrooms are a particular health and safety hazard for folks. And porta potties, it would be very hard for us to keep that clean and monitored.
Oh, it certainly would. And there aren't the ability for people to really clean up.
Right.
Yep. I hear what you're saying.
Sophie? No, I think she froze. I just wanted to clarify. She had mentioned that Gould's Landing is closed. It is just the park. The landing is still open.
Yeah.
People can put their boats in. There's still access to the but the Gould's Landing parking and Gould's Landing, the Meadow Savoy Park and the parking for that is closed.
So my Facebook expert, the person that I put in charge of that, really thinks that it's kind of died down at this point and feels like if we post now, we're reopening the conversation and it's likely to just spin it back up.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but I just, so maybe should we have to message again in some way about this issue, that could be part of the conversation? Yes. I mean, I wouldn't have necessarily anticipated that response either. But clearly that's, you know, there's maybe some misunderstanding from folks about how that all works with the porta potties. So if we do have to put any future Gould's Landing related messaging out, we might slip that in.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. All right. Two more things. The next is I've been working with staff to talk about the transition to being more open. And given the footprint here, it's really hard for us to envision just opening the doors at Town Hall to just let everybody in. Even moving to public meetings, I think, is going to be a challenge because it's not just we can have 50 people. We're limited by the number of people that we can put in a space given the square footage. So I've been working with Belle because she manages down front. And what we've really come to is on June 1st, looking to begin a slow transition where we might be able to be open by appointment. So taking advantage, we would advertise the hours that we had talked to you about going into July 1, which would be those reduced office hours. So being open Monday through Thursday to the public. We figured that instead of for 1 month being open 5 days and then curtailing it back didn't really make a lot of sense. So we would just do office hours by appointment during those general hours, Monday through Thursday. We also are looking at learning from Lori, this idea of curbside delivery. One of the things we've heard is that people love the fact that they can drop stuff in our drop box, which is secure, but there really isn't a way for people to be able to pick up from us outside of regular business hours. And we think that's a service that people could use even outside of COVID-19. And we know that some public safety activity could be facilitated that way as well. So right now we're looking at a different setup, but similar idea of a locker type system that would go in at the place in public safety, the entryway, the vestibule area where people can get at 24 hours a day, that would be locking, that you'd unlock with a code for your personal use, and then we would redo it. So the thought is to, much like we're doing with Lori down front, just begin to open that in small increments and kind of see how it goes. At this point, I think we're able to help I don't know of a request that has gone unanswered yet. So that is what I have for the transition, as long as you guys are okay with that. Everything else will stay locked down and no public in the rest of the buildings. The final is we had a lengthy chat about LGBTQ plus recognition, specifically around Pride Month. And we said we wanted it to be more formalized and less of a wait till the last minute and then don't know what we're going to do and then make people upset. So I actually reached out to Cindy and suggested that a good way to maybe start this would be to gather a small group of people to help inform staff to be able to craft a proposal to bring back to the town council for a formal plan for how we're going to recognize Pride. And my suggestion was the comp plan committee has a lot of, is spending a lot of time around pedestrian and transportation type stuff. And I think a lot of the Pride stuff seems to want to navigate that. And our community development committee deals with the effects of town policy and programs on the community all the time. So I would like to create my own staff committee that would include 2 counselors, the 2 chairs of the comp plan and community development committee, along with a representative from Stillwater Community Arts, because they're likely going to be who, it seems like we want art, and they are our go-to group. And then 2 other community members, which I think I would just ask the 2 counselors to help me pick. Does that seem like a decent path forward, that we would then bring a plan back to you and have you be able to have something to at least discuss?
Except that I'd like to be a participant. I've been an advocate for the town members that sent us a request about this. And I'm not either the chair of the community development or the,
As soon as we put more than 2 counselors on it, then it becomes a council committee and needs to be advertised to the community to attend as open.
right. So I'm volunteering to serve on one of those, as one of the people representing one of those committees, even though I'm not a chair of either of those committees.
At this point, I think it's easier to work with chairs, and we usually do that with the finance and me all the time. So when we bring it back to full council, I think we can definitely have your input on it. And I don't think that this will be a committee that meets too many times, so.
I'm looking just to get a proposal back to council that you can have as a starting point to move forward.
Good.
That's all I have.
All right. Well,
Is there some demolition going on in your house? What's happening?
I think that's the sign that it's dinner time, so.
Connie's throwing dishes.
We will return 4 o'clock Thursday, and Tom will fill in for you, Cindy, if you get waylaid.
Right.
Late.
Too much construction between here and Bangor.
All right.
All right. Thanks. See you
All right.
all Thursday.
Thank you all.
Bye.